Hello and welcome back to my channel. Today I have a by request tutorial. One of my viewers wanted to learn how to paint a cactus, so hopefully this will help. For starters, I am working on Arches oil paper with Charvin oil paints. There is a mixture of bamboo green, cadmium yellow pale hue, and titanium white for the highlight, and green shade with bamboo green and cadmium yellow for the shade. I also have Van Dyke brown for the spines and a tiny bit of ivory black mixed in with the green shade for the super dark areas, of which there are few. I used a Mimik Hog brush to paint this area in and a Loew-Cornell 7350 liner brush in 0. I don't live in an area with many cacti that aren't in someone's yard, so instead of being weird and taking pictures in front of someone's house, I grabbed an image from the internet for a model. One of the few that didn't look as though it was flipping off the viewer. As you can see, I quickly sketched out a cactus and painted in the base layer, just mapping in the highlight and shadow areas. Super quick and easy. I allowed that to dry, drew a few faint lines in a Tombow 2H pencil, and now we can get started with the rest. Before we begin, we need to take a look at the construction of an actual saguaro cactus. The cactus is comprised of a long trunk tapering to a crown with a varying number of arms. Upon the crown and the arms are little growths of fruit. The trunk and the arms are lined in ribs with spines shooting out from them. The construction is sort of like V-shaped peaks and valleys, so we have to be mindful of our light source in this instance and make determinations bit by bit about how the light is going to fall on these peaks and valleys. It's not quite as straightforward as a smoothly rounded object would react to light. Unfortunately, I had to keep this cactus small to fit in the frame of the camera, so I couldn't get as much detail in there as I liked, but hopefully I can talk you through it enough so that you can paint it with more detail if you choose, because the whole thing is really very geometric. If you're looking to make a cactus the focal point of your painting, full of detail, I'd definitely consider using a larger canvas for your cactus. As it stands, for this example, I had to remove 2 of the ribs that are in my reference photo, so I have some room to work in the peaks and valleys so you can understand what's going on. I'm going to attack this in 2 ways for 2 options of executing the detail work. For the trunk of the cactus, I'm actually going to start in a bit of a backwards way because I know that sometimes following lines so close together can be visually confusing or frustrating for some people. So, working backwards, I'm going to start with some really rough spines in sections just to better mark out my ribs, since the spines grow out of the ribs. For this, I'm using Van Dyke brown, but any brown will be useful for this. I'm not going for perfection here either because for the most part, a lot of this will be eliminated as the work progresses, but this will visually simplify the task. I'm starting at the base here, more just for the viewer. You can continue working your way up, it doesn't matter. I'm only concentrating on the lower part of the trunk here because the spaces between the ribs are larger and hopefully easier to see what I'm doing here for you guys. The ribs taper on the way up, but the method of painting remains largely the same. Now, the space that lies in between the lines of the spines I will split in 2. My light source is coming from the left, so I want to shadow the right sides of the peaks, which is what I'm doing here. As the trunk curves, you'll see me grabbing slightly lighter shades of the same hue to allow for the diffusion of light peeking over the ribs. If you noticed on the photo of the actual saguaro cactus, the valley between the peaks on the sides that aren't in full direct sunlight can be a pretty, tight, dark line, which is what I'm painting in here. This line is not present in full sun, but sort of fades in as the trunk moves into the shadow, but doesn't show up quite as much in full shadow. After that, I'm going in and touching up areas with the highlight color as needed. I'll come back to refine the spines at the very end. That's really the main technique, so I'll finish this trunk up, continuing the technique where I have room, and generally fudging in the rest of the way. As long as the primary information reads to the viewer's eye, we don't have to be obsessive and paint what we know is there, but what we don't really see much of. Because, as backwards as this sounds, if you do that, it will read less realistic to your viewer. Strange, yet true. Now, if you're not someone affected by the visual chaos of a lot of lines, you can go in like I am on the arms. Straight in with a shadow color, doing largely the same thing we did on the full trunk. The whole construction, trunk and arms, of a saguaro is the same, so once you get part of it, you really have the whole thing. I'm going to add the fruit here as well, not forgetting the highlight and shadow sides of the fruit as well. You can add holes in the saguaro cactus if you want, where the birds burrow in, but I think they're ugly, so I'm not, but feel free if you like. The only difference on this arm really is that the little holes the spines come out of, I suppose you can call them, are slightly raised. So I'll go in with a lighter highlight color and then a shadow color right underneath them to suggest this raised area. This is the only area that is showing up on my model though, so use it sparingly. Here I'm back on the spines, and with a pushing out motion, I am putting those long spines back in. They seem pretty uniform in real life, so if you're doing this on your final canvas, you can be more exact with the spine placement than I am here, or you could keep it freeform. It's up to you and your style. For the last little steps here, I am going to take my highlight color and mix it with a bit of transparent white, because I want just a small step down in intensity, and the transparent white helps keep the drop in tone a bit more in check than a titanium white. Being that cacti can be wonky, some for lack of a better term, I want to place some lighter highlight areas to give it that look of having some of the ribs stick out a little more than others, and also give it a little more of that sun-bleached feeling. Now, for the very last thing to do, which I'm not going to do here because it's going to look whack since it has no background, and you're going to be like, Devin, seriously, what are you doing? That looks stupid, and you'd be right, is to add the spines that are coming off of the perimeter. Do this, of course, after your background around the cactus is completely painted. The look is supposed to be almost fuzzy in nature, so keep a short supply of paint on a tiny brush and tap them in lightly, or you can even go in with a fan brush just using the center portion of the brush and tap them in. You want it to be almost to the point of being a dry brush technique, creating a brown glow of fuzz around your cactus. This will help push the cactus back on your canvas where it needs to be. Without the spines, it will sit a little unnaturally forward, and the painting will end up being a little more about the cactus than an overall landscape. The last thing I really want to say about painting a cactus is that they're weird. I mean, really, they're weird, right? The longer you work on it, the stranger they seem for some reason. They're sort of like when you stare at a word you've seen a million times in your life, and the longer you look at it, the stranger it becomes. Additionally, this type of large cactus anyway is not something the majority of people see in their normal landscape on the regular, so our brains haven't locked it in as they have a tree or something widely found. So if you're sitting there painting your cactus and not really feeling the love for your work and thinking it looks a bit weird, you're probably doing well. Don't fret too much over that. But that's it. That's all there is to it. Just keep those V-shaped peaks and valleys in mind and you'll have it covered in no time. I hope you all enjoyed this tutorial. I have more by request tutorials coming up very soon. If you have any requests for me, please leave them below in the comment section and I will add them to my list. I have some different trees upcoming as well as some fluffy cumulus clouds, so stay tuned for those. Thanks everyone for tuning in. As always, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them down below and I'll get right back to you on them. Have a wonderful day, you guys. Happy painting!